Hey there, YouTube, uh, DTube, Rumble, Daily Motion, all the platforms we're going to be distributing this on. This is a very special live stream edition of the Terry Wilkerson Show. As you can see in the bottom corner there, our new live stream edition logo. We're really good at coming up with new logos. All right, I'm only going to take a few minutes of your time here. There was a disagreement earlier on Facebook that I just wanted to bring up a couple of points for. The disagreement was on whether or not people who are anti-vax should have the ability to express that opinion on social media. And I got into a very brief argument with another person on Facebook, and quite frankly, I find their opinion ridiculous. I find their opinion offensive, but they're entitled to that opinion. That's what the First Amendment is all about, and that's what I was trying to explain. And basically what I was being told is that when it comes to health, individuals have no rights. You have to supplicate yourself to the benefit of the masses. Now, I was trying to explain to this person that I don't think they understand the concept of individual rights. And it should be very easy considering there's only two words to learn: individual and rights. So I want to take a couple of seconds of your time to just give you some thoughts on this. Number one, the individual is solely responsible to act upon his or her rights. Number two, there is no collective brain. The mind is an attribute of the individual. To exercise a right, one must be aware of it. Awareness is a trait solely of the individual. A collective does not possess the single mind to acknowledge the existence of a right. Collective thought can only result in forcing the dissenters in the group to believe as the majority does. And number three, the act of forcing one to concede to the opinion of the masses is called coercion. Coercion is the action of weak-minded collectivists who have no individual argument to make. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a second for each of these points. Number one, the individual is solely responsible to act upon his or her rights. Now, chronologically, this might be the second most important argument in this because the collective brain concept is the most important. But in order for a right to be exercised, the person who has that right has to act upon it. That means it has to be you or me or whomever acting upon that right. That means that we have to be the one to exercise it. Whether we want to use it in a negative or a positive fashion, we have to be the one to either exercise it or allow it to lapse. Not the collective. The collective cannot make the decision on whether or not the right is applicable. That has to be your decision. Do you want to use your right to freedom of speech, to freedom of religion? Do you want to use your right to freedom to bear arms? It's not the collective that makes that decision. It's you, the individual. Now, the second part here is there is no collective brain. Awareness is one of the most important parts of being a human being. You have to be conscious of your rights in order to exercise them. And the collective does not have a conscience, let alone a consciousness. The collective has basically a bargaining system. Now, let's say that you were part of 100 people, and the group was trying to figure out whether or not you were entitled to have a 3-ring binder. You might have some in the group who say, of course you're entitled to a 3-ring binder. Of course you're allowed to have one. You might have more people in the group saying, well, no, you're not entitled to a 3-ring binder. It's not necessary. It's not necessary with all the technology and all of this. And another group of people might say, why is there an argument for a 3-ring binder at all? This is a completely stupid argument. So you're not going to reach a consensus when it comes to the masses. However, an individual making that decision could sit there and go, yes, I need a 3-ring binder. No, I don't. Now, you may think that's it's a petty argument, but it's a great example of where we're at. Because we have a collective, we have a mass of people making decisions for individuals who do not think the same way that they do. And we are being forced, and we'll get into that in a second, we're being forced to either kowtow to that opinion or to suffer consequences. And that is called what? Coercion. Our government has been doing this since the beginning. Not just our government, all governments in human history have ultimately ended up becoming coercive. because a government for the people, of the people, by the people has a tendency to create cliques, a tendency to create little groups of people that have their own agenda. And when you give power to people who have an agenda, Congress, perhaps, you end up basically being forced to deal with whatever their agenda is with absolutely no recourse when it comes to how it affects you personally. You could vote people out, but I don't really see us as a nation right now being very quick to vote out the people who have ruined our country. So these people have no intellectual argument to give. They only have their collectivist mentality, their forced ideology. That's it. It's not very difficult to understand the concept of individual rights if you understand the concept of individual rights. Rights are guaranteed by the Constitution and by God to the individual. Now, let me take a step back. That last particular comment, I've always been a constitutionalist, but it's only been recently that I've really returned to any type of faith. And one of the things that I have been just shocked by rereading the Bible is that God never speaks to men in general. God speaks to one person at a time. And the translations that we have, let me rephrase that. So we're meant to believe that God only spoke to one person at a time. Thereby, even God himself bestowed the concept of the individual right onto the individual. The Constitution is fully based on rights for the individual. It is a negative rights document. Certain things the government are not allowed to prohibit. And that is to the individual citizen. And we should have a drinking game. Every time I say individual on this show, take a shot. I'll take a shot of water. So that's really all I wanted to say, was to just ask you to take a second to think about the concept of individual rights and what it means to be an individual versus a member of the collective. Of course, we're always going to be discussing this on my podcast, The Terry Wilkerson Show, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Anchor.fm, and wherever you download your fine podcast content. And of course, you can always visit www.terrywilkerson.com, the home of all things that I find to be important. After all, it's my website. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating if you're watching this on any of the major video platforms such as YouTube or Dailymotion. Give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell so that you find out every time we have a new video up. And we will see you next time. Until all are one.